Okay, so let's have a look at the ladder of learning. Now, this is a theory that it's really hard to attribute. It's just been around forever. You can't actually say who developed it because there's so many different arguments about it. But this ladder of learning is all about how we learn as adults new skills, how we develop our skill base. And so it can be really helpful for students who are on placement or for newly qualified workers to think about how they're developing their skills. So the idea is the ladder of learning has 4 rungs to it. And the first rung is unconscious incompetence. That is, we don't know what we don't know. You could almost describe it in a way as a sense of like blissful ignorance. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I can't do. I'll bet, I'm taking a guess here, that you can't count from 1 to 10 in Japanese. But if I were to say to you now, oh, you can't pass your social work qualification or you can't pass your ASYE year unless you can speak from 1 to 10 in Japanese, all of a sudden you become aware that you can't do it. But you've never thought about that before. You've never thought about the fact you can't count from 1 to 10 in Japanese. So the thing about unconscious incompetence is you've no idea that you don't know something. Over the years, I've talked to quite a few practice educators and assessors of newly qualified workers who've said things to me like, well, this student just seems really laid back. They don't really seem concerned or worried about the placement or anxious or anything. Well, maybe that's because they don't know what's going to be involved. They don't know what they don't know. And as a newly qualified social worker, sometimes, you've just got the qualification, you've just done brilliantly. Maybe you got a first class, you're an outstanding student. You're going to go off thinking, I can do this. But actually, this is the very beginning. So you're setting off at the point possibly of unconscious incompetence. You've no idea what you can't do. Then we go to the next rung of the ladder. The next rung of the ladder is conscious incompetence. All of a sudden, we become aware of what we can't do. Let's use an analogy to help us to think about the ladder of learning. Learning to drive is a really good analogy. So you set off learning to drive probably from a stage of unconscious incompetence. You've been used to getting in a car as a passenger and just driving about, or maybe getting on a bus and off a bus, and you think it's easy. But actually, the first time you get behind the driving wheel and you've got to indicate, change gear and steer all at the same time, you think, I can't do this. I just can't do this. The danger is that at that point, that conscious incompetence, when we become aware that we don't have that skill, that we can't do something, that can push us towards one of 2 things, either fight or flight, really. What can happen is we concede the task, we just give up, we think, oh, it's too much for me, I'm not going to bother. Or we stick with it and we really try to learn this new skill. Because in our society, we're, I suppose, socialised into there's no such word as can't. We tell children that all the time. Because of that socialisation, when we get to the point of conscious incompetence and we kind of feel like we can't do something, sometimes we go into a denial, or we don't want to tell people that we can't do something. So we're asked to take on a task and we'll say, oh yeah, sure, that's fine, I'll do that. Where actually we're not able to do it. The most important thing is that you ask for help at that point, that you say, at this point, I don't have those skills I'd really like to learn. Could you help me with that to some extent? So you actually let people know what help you're going to need in order to learn the task. That stage of conscious incompetence is the most dangerous phase. So just be conscious around that. When you're feeling like, I can't do this, you're not the only one who's felt like that. You need to share that. Once we've stuck with the task and we keep on going and we learn this new skill, we go to the next rung of the ladder, conscious competence. This is where we're really aware of our newly acquired skill. We've only just learnt it, so we're very thoughtful about it. Going back to learning to drive, think about when you first learned to drive. You have to have your hands at 10 to 2 on the wheel. You'll do mirror, signal, manoeuvre, exactly the way you've been taught. But once you've been driving for a while, you get a little bit more relaxed and you maybe slip into a few bad habits. And that's where we go to what would be seen as the final rung of the ladder of unconscious competence. So that rung means we can do it, but we're not conscious of it. We're not really aware of it. So we've kind of slipped into potentially a few bad habits. We've gone on to an autopilot, possibly. When I first learned to drive, and I've got to be honest here, it took me 5 attempts. I was not the best driver. And I lived in the same house I live in now, and it's 28 years ago I learned to drive. And when I leave here, I have to turn right onto a busy main road to go to most places. Well, when I'd first learned to drive, I would spend hours planning routes, thinking about how I could drive around the whole of the area so that I didn't have to do any right turns onto main roads. Because this skill was so new to me, I was really thoughtful about it. Now I'm at the point where I just get in the car and drive. And if you do the same regular route on a regular basis, you'll be familiar with that point where you'll drive somewhere and think, oh, I don't remember going under the bridge and over the roundabout. Because we've done it on autopilot, we're no longer thinking about it. We're not conscious of it. So where this is presented as a ladder, in many ways, I think there should be a cycle about this. Because if you're unconscious about it, how do you know that you're still competent? You know, if you're not aware of what you're doing, you might not be doing it well. So if I had a driving examiner sitting in the back of my car and I wasn't aware of it, I'd probably fail a test because I've slipped into some, bad habits. And if we're honest, many of us have. So the real importance of continual professional development in social work is making sure that we remain in that conscious, competent phase, because that's the only safe zone to be in. Now, as a newly qualified social worker, one of the things that can happen to you is you're bombarded with needing to learn lots of new skills. And so you don't just go through this ladder once. This ladder is going on for you in terms of a whole range of different skills, and you're going to be at different rungs of the ladder in terms of different skills. At some points, you might feel overwhelmed by all of these new things that you've got to learn, and you might end up at the same difficult rung of the ladder in relation to a range of different skills. When that happens, sometimes you can feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you take a bit of a dip in terms of your confidence levels. It's important to talk to other people. Everybody feels like that at some point. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that you think to yourself, well, I'm incompetent and I've just realised that I'm incompetent and that's what's going on, because that isn't going to help your confidence levels, is it? But using the ladder of learning can really help you to understand what's going on here. And if you stick with it, you'll soon develop the competence in that skill. So the ladder of learning can be really helpful to us in a whole range of ways in understanding ourselves as social workers. But there's a final point here. I think we don't use adult learning theory enough in our practice with service users. So let's imagine you've asked a family to make some changes in their household because that's important in terms of keeping a child safe, for example. And they'll say to you, oh yes, yeah, I'll do that. And then you go back the following week and they've not done it. Social workers do all kinds of things like begin to label that up as disguised compliance. All kinds of judgments are made about people. But maybe that family was at the point of conscious incompetence. They don't know how to do what you've asked them to do, but it's too difficult for them to tell you that. Maybe we could use an understanding of the ladder of learning when we're trying to support people to learn, develop, and promote change. So the ladder of learning, as most social work theories, can be helpful in a whole range of ways. Think about yourself. Where are you at the moment?